Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Overlooked News. We got a bunch of juicy topics today that involve a lot of people protesting, not necessarily in this country, but throughout the world. But first, Z, about the co-host. We're both co-host here. How you doing, Z?
Doing good. I'm gonna hit the opening and we'll get started.
Hello again.
What's going on, everybody? Yeah. So I just wanted to test out a little opening intro thing, see how we do there. But anywho, let's get to that first story. We're gonna go over the Sri Lankan protests, and then we're gonna be going over the Dutch protests, farmer protests, and then we're gonna be going over the anti-abortion judge that Biden is pushing through. So. Let me get this video up, and okay.
It'll be good. We'll go to Sri Lanka first, then we're going to the Netherlands, then we're going to the U.S. You know,
we're going worldwide today.
Worldwide. Not Pitbull style though. Just like
Oh my God. Yeah.
Not.
Pitbull's such a jerk. But for people who don't know. The Sri Lankan government has ran into a pretty much a crisis where in the past couple months this has been a buildup. Sri Lanka has pretty much put itself into debt worldwide, and so what ended up happening, there's been a crisis. They can't pay for anything, and because that's happened, that has hit the bottom really hard. It's hit the everyday person in Sri Lanka really hard. So there's been a mass. Pretty much the whole country is in protest, and they like 2 or 3 days ago, they infiltrated the government palace pretty much, and they got into the president's house, and they've been taking pictures, and it's pretty basic, to be honest. It's showing up. It's showing up these lame, like Andrew was saying before we got on here. He was talking about the fact that people want to just let Kavanaugh eat here, but over there they're just like, we're gonna eat in the president's house because we feel like it. It's like it's really cool. So
we're going to take over your house. You are going to run away and leave and flee, and we are going to create another fucking constitution. Get the fuck out.
They like the president got out, but his brother did not share the same fate. He is still trapped in the country. He tried to flee, but that didn't work out for him. So I'm going to go ahead and start up this video from Al-Jazeera. It gives a lot more context to the situation. And okay.
From Sri Lanka, where protesters
in
Colombo have stormed the official residence
of
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, demanding his resignation. Demonstrators from around the country have converged on the capital. They're protesting against the months-long economic crisis and widespread shortages. And they called today Saturday D-Day, saying it's the day that the president and his government will have to go. Al Jazeera's Manel Fernandez is at those protests in front of the president's home in Colombo. She's on the line now. Manel, what's happening? Hello, Manel? No, I'm afraid we have lost Manel Fernandez. So
I'm going to fast forward that to a little bit.
Yeah, they got to go to plan B because they can't get a hold of her because of they're clogging up the lines, all the protesters.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure the internet is not working over there that well.
They actually say that later on.
Huge issue. So there is now some sort of hope along a lot of people that change can really happen. And once that change happens, once the heads at the helm of this really do change, there is some sense that policy change, policy reform can actually be implemented now and can actually be accepted by the people. That the pain that they're going through will be worth it for the reforms and the changes that will be coming in the future.
The protesters have dubbed today D-Day, the day that the president and the government have to go. Do you think that's going to happen anytime soon?
Well, the last time that the government, or rather the people, really protested, there was a big change. The prime minister left. The time before that, on the 31st of March, when again there was a huge upswelling of people's organic protest, a big change in governance, a big change in the people, actually the ministers, some of the key economic technocrats who left. So there have been changes in the past. So I personally do feel that it is looking increasingly likely that the president will have to take some sort of steps away. Now you're seeing MPs from the president's own party calling for him to step down. Now we're seeing the prime minister calling for some sort of
I'm gonna pause it right there because the past couple of days the president actually has he is fled, he is gone. Let me see. I have another video that puts into the context because we've been seeing a lot of Western media say that the reason that Sri Lanka is in debt is because of China, and really it is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which is pretty much headed by the U.S. and the countries like our colonies like Japan and India. India's not really a colony of ours, but Japan and another part in India has also put it in debt. So I was watching Multipolarista with Ben Norton here. He gives a really good explanation of what's going on here. And you see right here, we have a. Can you see this?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so because it was about to be. Okay, let me see. He gives a pretty good explanation about the fact that has a nice little graph on this page, I think. What do you think about that, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I find this very interesting because, and I don't know if Ben Norton's going to be talking about this later, but there's all these people gathered outside the prime minister's home, to the point where the prime minister had to actually flee because everybody was crowding outside his home. And they have 6 demands, 6 very, very specific demands that they want. They want a new constitution that endorses a people's gov. They want an interim government established in the meantime, maximum 1 year. They want the president's executive powers reduced, and to strengthen dem institutions meanwhile. And then so they are they really are trying to just tear the whole thing down. And I think what's really interesting is that literally, and this kind of reminds me of what's going on in the U.S. as well. The president, so once the prime minister steps down, which the prime minister has stepped down, has fled, the president takes over. However, they also hate the president. So the president also has said that at some point soon that he will be also stepping down. Then that leads to the speaker. The speaker is a relative of the prime minister because this is all very nepotistic, and this family, the Rajapaksa's, I'm probably mispronouncing it, sorry, have been ruling for years and years and years, which is part of this whole anxiety and anger that is going on because they really hate the politicians that have been running. And of course, what's one way to get citizens to hate politicians? Well, have food shortages, have medicine shortages. That sounds familiar.
And I think that's funny that you highlight that. Like you're like, this really highlights the situation in the U.S. too, because that's just the neoliberal order we're seeing. We're seeing that it's all over the world. It's from Sri Lanka to Japan to Brazil. It's just destroying the country's resources. It's destroying like everyone's like livelihood, and in the guise of like saying it's making everything better and more equal for everyone. But it's actually taking the resources, making it better for corporate interests to come in and make everything, privatize everything. And so we're seeing a lot of countries start to reject that, and we're seeing the breakdown of neoliberalism in real time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I want to play this video real fast to show a lot of the a counter narrative to a lot of the Western media.
Sri Lanka owes vast majority to West, not China. And in this video, or in this podcast version today, every source I cite can be found in this article at multipolarista.com. And I'm going to begin looking at a graph of Sri Lanka.
Can we get everybody to give the video a like?
This data comes directly from the Sri Lankan government.
And subscribe.
From Sri Lanka's Department of External Resources. This is the Sri Lankan government website. And you can see here the foreign debt summary. And this is as of the end of April 2021, the most recent debt statistics that we have. Now, the graph on the Sri Lankan government's website is not very good. So I'm going to use a different graph here from German state media, DW, but it's using the exact same data.
Okay, so we can make this out ourselves. You're seeing the market borrowings, which is pretty much a code for the West. India, 2%, and 10% Japan, and China has about the same as Japan and But the only thing is Japan is really just going back to the IMF too, because they're part of the International Monetary Fund, so that still pretty much goes back to market borrowings. So that would still make it about 57%. The World Bank as well, which is a Western bank. So it all really does go back to this country and this monetary fund. And what happens when I think that I was reading something from Terrence McKenna. He was talking about the fact that anytime it's more what's scarier than active war is you see these 4 businessmen in a jet come with their suitcases, and that is way scarier than an active war because they're the ones who are calling all the shots. So,
absolutely, and I think one thing that's always important when it comes to the IMF is that they only give money on conditional uses, right? So they will give money to, say, countries like Sri Lanka if they say, well, you gotta cut taxes here. For they basically enforce neoliberal policies in order for them to get money, and in order for these countries to then receive money from the IMF. And so it really is, we hear like this whole New World Order type of stuff, which a lot of it is, it really is a neoliberal world order in that sense, right? And so,
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's crashing hard. I want to play a little bit more of this video, and then we can move on to a little bit more broad protest stuff. I want to actually look at a little bit of that.
And it shows that 81% of Sri Lanka's foreign debt is owned by Western financial institutions and Western allies, India and Japan. And here you can see that nearly half of Sri Lanka's foreign debt is described as market borrowings, which means private financial institutions, largely banks and vulture funds based in the West. And what are those firms? Well, the top firms are all in the US and Europe. Here's an example. Here are the top firms that own the Sri Lankan government's debt in the form of sovereign bonds. BlackRock from the United States, Ashmore Group from Britain, Allianz from Germany.
Okay, so we're seeing a pattern here, because it is becoming an international issue. This isn't reserved to one country because of globalization. We have in BlackRock is taking over the U.S. as well, like that. Most of the property in the U.S. is starting to be owned by BlackRock. Even if it's physical property to intellectual property. We see BlackRock has a stake in Spotify, and we saw that with the Neil Young controversy. And if people go look, actually, Neil Young put his music back on Spotify. But but BlackRock is not just stopping at the U.S. It has a stake in international property. So we're seeing that it's metastasizing into something like very, very disturbing.
Yeah, it's 2022 colonialism, essentially, right?
Exactly. It's neo-colonialism, exactly.
UBS from Switzerland, HSBC from Britain, JP Morgan Chase from the US, and Prudential, also the US. So we're talking about asset management firms, vulture funds, and banks from the United States and Europe. They own nearly half of Sri Lanka's foreign debt. Now, here's an article in Japan's major media outlet, Nikkei, and it's titled Sri Lanka's International Bondholders Brace for a Haircut. And it shows, this is from April, it shows that many of the firms that hold Sri Lanka's debt in the form of bonds are these Western vulture funds. It talks about negotiations that were going on between the Sri Lankan government and the US-dominated International Monetary Fund, the IMF. It notes this is the 17th time that Sri Lanka has sought an IMF bailout. I'm going to come back to that point in a second because it's very important. And if you go down here in this report, it notes some of the main holders of Sri Lanka's international sovereign bonds, ISBs. Among the top 20 are BlackRock, Allianz, UBS, HSBC, JP Morgan Chase, and Prudential. Note, they don't mention China here. We're talking about Western vulture funds and banks. Now, here's a report in Reuters from April about BlackRock and Ashmore Group, part of a creditor group that were in talks about Sri Lanka.
All right, I'm gonna stop it right there. So, yeah, I want to go keep watching that. That's in the link. Multipolarista. It's a really good source for international news, ran by Ben Norton. But yeah, what I want to talk about, another thing that's going on is there was actually another thing is the fuel shortage that we have helped create, and that's also hurting Sri Lanka as well. They rely on gas as well to get to and fro, and that's also another issue in what's going on and why we're seeing an uprising from them, because they can't afford gas, and when they can't afford it, it's probably not there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, going back to how militant, and I mean this in a good way, right? These protesters are against these politicians. I recently learned too that back in 2009 they finished up having a civil war, right? So
yeah,
this country has a recent history of just a lot of unrest. So I guess in many ways they are used to sort of chaos and stirring, and it's like, all right, here we go again, back on the streets, demanding what we need best for ourselves. So, but of course, yeah, the main narrative will always be it's China's fault, right? For the holding debt, and not any of these American-made companies like BlackRock, which BlackRock is probably part of the reason why your rent is going up,
exactly,
your housing prices, right? While you're at home blaming China, the reason why you're struggling to afford rent or to afford your mortgage maybe or is either directly or indirectly as a result of BlackRock.
And I want to talk about some of that militancy and actually, taking to the streets in a meaningful way, because I want people to see this. This is one of the funniest things and greatest things I've seen in a while.
In Sri Lanka say that they'll continue to occupy the presidential and prime ministerial residences until both leaders officially resign. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa will reportedly step down on Wednesday, but he hasn't given a statement in public and his whereabouts are unknown. Thousands of people descended on Colombo yesterday, enraged by the country's economic mismanagement, which has caused shortages of food, fuel and medicine for months. Our South Asia correspondent Rajini Vaidyanathan reports now from inside the presidential palace, which has been overrun by protesters.
These scenes would have been unthinkable days ago. Sri Lanka's seat of presidential power, now a sightseeing destination. Security nowhere to be seen, as thousands push their way in to a palace taken over by protesters.
This is a really surreal moment for Sri Lanka. A building that is normally heavily fortified, now a free-for-all.
At President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's private pool, we meet carpenter Ruan Chaminda, who's taking a dip. A moment of relief after he walked hours to join the protests.
My kids are hungry. We don't have fuel. We don't have cooking gas. We don't even have fuel to do our jobs properly.
How does it feel to swim in the president's personal pool?
I'm happy. I'm so happy.
Moments of...
All right, well that's on the that's in BBC on BBC, and y'all can go watch that there. But yeah, I just wanted everyone to see that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's important too for people to realize that this has been going on for like several days. They've been occupying, right? This isn't just like a day thing, a few hours. Like they are committed.
And I don't know much about Sri Lankan history, but I do know the fact that Sri Lanka was actually like let go in 1948 from Britain, and then the U.S. immediately came in. So yeah, they really haven't had like a time to be like sovereign and independent, and you're seeing that there's a lot of unrest there. It's like kind of like how all the unrest that's been in the Middle East since the 1950s. We've just been destroying like every country that we see fit and put them in debt.
Yeah, every non-European country is you know.
And speaking of European countries going into debt, let's move on to our next target, the farmers in Denmark. Is it Denmark?
No, the Netherlands. It's the Netherlands.
Okay. I always get those confused, to be honest. It's like the Dutch are Netherlands, but like it's so weird because it's a completely different word. Usually, like when it's like, yeah.
It's also interesting to think that like the Dutch were pretty strong colonists, right? Like they
started it.
Yeah, they started it, and now it's like countries like this big.
They're like, we're just a tiny country who
like
did a racism one time.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, it's like I guess when the U.S. is like stomping around, like, you know, you don't have much like. First off, if you make bad with them, they're gonna kick your ass. But for the most part, so you're just kissing their ass, and then you know they're gonna try to do everything bigger and better. So what's the point? Just focus on yourself. I guess that's what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're seeing a bill that's being passed in Parliament in the Netherlands, and this bill, though, it's complicated. It's complicated because it's a green bill. However, this green bill is forcing farmers to completely abandon like all their livelihood in a short amount of time with no compensation. So, the World Economic Forum controlled Dutch government announced last week an end to modern farming, putting harsh controls on nitrogen and spelling the end to thousands of family farms. In response, Dutch farmers took a page out of the Canadian Freedom Conflict book. They took to the highways, blockaded the borders, and launched massive protests. Now, that's the thing. A lot of people are saying, even though it might be not on their political spectrum, it's not. It's the fact that these are working class people. This is still class struggle, regardless if it's left or right. And one of the things that I do want to comment is the fact that the Freedom Convoy was even though like a lot of people out there weren't savory, in my opinion, but I think that blockading and actually stopping business is the only way to get to government, and actually blocking the roads in the highway systems and all the systems that's one thing that that actually works. Or as we see in Sri Lanka, just flooding everything.
No, for sure.
No, it does not sound like the Never Land. It sounds like a hellhole there. The more and more we read about it.
Shocked, we were lied to.
Yep, lied to once again. Bamboozled.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, I am a little torn on this. I hate to be the person who I'm like, oh, I'll be in the middle. I'm playing both sides, right? They even though they don't necessarily line up ideologically, you can still appreciate the tactics they're using, and you can still learn from it. And also feel for small farmers who, from this, we're going to talk about more, will be losing their livelihood from this bill, right? And so it really is as people who care about the environment, and we care about environmental regulations, right? It's also important we recognize that if regulations are hurting small farmers, right, then we need to take a look at that, right?
And one thing I want to show, they literally went and like to a Bill Gates Foundation supermarket. No one's in there, and it supposedly caught fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're targeting the people. They're targeting the people who are, hurting them. So I'm just gonna say that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool in theory, and shame on you, America. Shame on you, us, and our protests.
Yeah. So I guess the biggest things that they are trying to put against these small farmers is that they're making them use less fertilizer, which is supposedly going to reduce their livestock, which can make small farmers if they reduce their livestock, they're not going to be able to continue, right? And they also this bill also targets to reduce harmful nitrogen compounds by 2030 by at least 50% nitrogen emissions. Some places, I guess, I've seen even up to 90%. So, yeah. And from their side of the story, they need to preserve the biodiversity. And I guess nitrogen is hurting the biodiversity in the Netherlands. And at the same time, you're putting these farmers in a very hard place.
Now, generally, I would like us to do that and actually like reduce the nitrogen. I just think that there should be it doesn't seem like there's any type of subsidy or replacement for the farmers. It's just that it's just kicking them off and they don't have anything else to do. But
yeah,
being like it's our way of life. I mean, if your way of life is destroying the environment, you need to rethink your way of life, obviously.
Yes.
But if your way of life is not being guided into in that
providing food for people,
the government is literally just being nah, okay, you need to go. Bye. It's just shutting you down and then moving on to the next thing. It's not cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is, and that really gets down to the root of a lot of environmental policies harm the 99%, and they don't do anything to the 1% who are causing a lot of the environmental
that really is a thing that needs to be talked about. I mean, just like the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal was just was pretty much a blue washed version of an actual Green New Deal. It was really a capitalist version of the Green New Deal. It doesn't it reduces emissions slowly. It still puts everything into private companies, and it doesn't really tackle economic racism, not economic racism. It doesn't tackle environmental racism. And, the places that it would still be affecting those places. It doesn't have any kind of reimburse. I don't even think there was anything but we should have jobs and we should stop doing this. But there was no any technical things. But I mean, that was taken from the Green Party in the first place. The actual the Green Party's Green New Deal is actually a lot better than that. And I think that, honestly, I think that even that can be improved upon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think so. And then granted, there's been a lot of money, billions of dollars that have been pumped in to the climate denial industry, right? And it's also worth recognizing that one of the reasons why it lands is because they target people who are working class, who are getting affected by the regulations. And they're like, wait, but that company right there is pumping out a lot of fossil fuels right next to me, and nothing's happening with them. And so this is how you then gaslight a lot of people into pointing the finger at the wrong villain.
Hey, Noli's daughter. Thank you for watching. And hey, Noli. I just think that it's such a strange thing that the way they do the targeting, and then they have it who it affects, and at the same time it's the same people pushing both sides to this conflict, because it's very backwards, man.
And it's literally that's what billionaires do, right? They fund think tanks that say, oh, climate change exists. ExxonMobil literally has funded think tanks that say climate change is real. They've funded think tanks that say it's not real. And they're literally
They
doing
muddy the
what
waters on
billionaires
purpose.
Yeah, and they're literally doing what billionaires do with politicians, right? Dem and Republican, right? They fund both sides because they want a cut in their deal. And then people are confused and angry and gaslit. And
yeah, that's they are, they're gaslit as hell. Let me start this up really fast. I'm gonna start up this video. Pretty much just like she's there, like talking to some Dutch farmers and gives a really good explanation of the policy. And I think it talks a little bit about their demands as well.
Have said this mediator is not acceptable to us. They're sitting here, they're waiting here for maybe up to 2 days. Some of them, we've spoken to them before, have already sold their farms because they were not capable financially to run their business. You can see here slogans, if there is no farmers, there won't be food in the supermarkets. That's what they say. Some have even brought some hay. They're sitting here on it. They brought their wooden shoes. It's really a protest. They say they had no choice. We are fed up. And if you push us to the limit, this is what we're going to do. But the question, of course, remains today how the Dutch public will respond to this when there's no food or there's empty shelves in supermarkets today.
So what's the plan that's caused so much anger? Well, Dutch farmers have been told to cut nitrogen emissions to between 12 to 70%, depending on how close they are to conservation areas. Those areas are part of what the European Union is calling Natura 2000. It's the largest coordinated network of protected areas in the world. Farmers whose land is inside natural reserves will have to cut by 90%. And those who can't do that will have one of three options: switch to crop farming, relocate, or quit the trade.
It's like most of them, unless you're like a corporate farm.
If you give them those choices, what do you think is going to happen? People are going to say, fuck you, right? even if they care about the environment.
Any industry would like be like, fuck you. We care about the environment, and I'm sure if one of like something that you did every day, support for your family, and they're just like, nope, sorry, it doesn't exist anymore. You have to go do something else, and we're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to send you. We're just going to send you. Actually, we're not even going to send you. We might send you some material, like about farming and how to preserve that last 10% or 20% that you have. But I doubt that you're going to get any actual help. And I mean, you see that here too. I mean, it's not even just like you were saying, and like we were talking about a little bit earlier, how it connects to here. The food shortages. We already have a war going on in Ukraine, and Ukraine is like supposedly called the breadbasket of the world, and that's where we get a lot of our grain from. We're having a grain crisis, and Russia also is where we get a lot of our grain. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot left and right, and so are a lot of our allies. They're shooting themselves in the foot as well. We can see with this farming protest.
I think it's also important to point out too that it's in farmers' best interest for the environment to be healthy, so that their crops can grow, right? And so I'm sure too, like if you included them in the conversation, there could be like, I mean, again, I'm not there in the Netherlands, so I could be wrong, but these people don't strike me as like these crazy climate deniers, right? Like they're people who just trying to make ends meet.
Yeah. So it's really cool. It's really cool to see like a lot of these uprisings happen, and the world is starting to not take it. And it just seems like we are the only country, because Europe is not. And then we have to understand how young the country is. We're still young.
We're little babies.
We're little babies, and I'm sure it'll happen. But you can see the countries that had this shit worked out for a while already. It's like we've been protesting, and we've been sticking it to the government for a long time. We throw milkshakes when we need to, and we take to the streets when we need to. So it's pretty cool.
I mean, I don't know if we mentioned this, but they are the Netherlands is the second largest agricultural export after the United States. So if they're blocking shit, if farmers are blocking shit from coming out, right? Like people,
that's going to hit our shelves.
Yeah, it's going to hit our shelves. It's going to affect us. So, selfishly, this is something that is important for us in that way, right? Regardless if we want to debate on, in terms of whether or not this is necessary for the environment and climate, right? Regardless, this is going to cause a food shortage for us, likely. And
which we're already going through.
And then we have places like in Sri Lanka, hundreds of miles away, but in Sri Lanka, that are one of the problems that's happening in Sri Lanka is a food shortage. I don't think this is going to help their food shortage either, right? So it's fascinating how this all just intersects.
Mm-hmm. There is no thing that is unconnected anymore. Everything's interconnected because of globalization, the internet, and trade. Like and a lot of it has to do with us outsourcing. We could have, like, especially here, we could have we could incentivize actual farmers and not just corporate farmers like Trump did. But
yeah. But that's a dying art because those small farmers have only like one or two places to actually sell their food to, because
they're lucky if a restaurant comes and approaches them or something like that. But besides that, they're not selling anybody. They're
not even selling the prices. The seller is selling the prices because they literally have a monopoly on the farmers themselves. Like,
yeah, so it's so for them, what like you said, what choice would you even have at this point?
Right.
You've been getting played the whole time even in your career, and now you're seems fishy.
Learn to code. Right, that's what they said.
I can imagine the Netherlands saying that as well.
Probably, yeah. I mean, that was when they said, oh, or you could change to this type of farming. I forget what type of farming, right? I'm not a farmer, but I'm guessing it's probably like so much. There's a reason why they're not doing that farming to begin with, right? Let's just say that. So
it's true.
Yeah.
Move on to the next thing.
Yeah. So we were in Sri Lanka, then we went to the Netherlands. Now we're gonna unfortunately go back here to the U.S. I know.
We're taking an international trip around the world.
I know. It was kind of fun traveling, and now we have to get back to the misery here. But not that the other places are doing much better, as we saw. But
no.
As we all know, Biden is such an advocate for abortion rights, has been an advocate his whole career. No, not at all. So this is interesting because it was known like a week and a half ago, people were talking about how the day before Roe v. Wade got overturned, Biden had planned to confirm a judge in Kentucky that is anti-abortion, right? But then, even Biden was like, that'd be a little tone deaf to do that the day of Roe v. Wade, so let's just sit and wait this out a little bit. Well, you would think that maybe Biden would be like, okay, maybe we should get like a pro-choice judge in Kentucky.
No,
right? Especially
Biden is in shout out to any Catholics out there. But Biden's Catholic, so he's in secret. Him and like people like Biden and Pelosi are like, oh hell yeah, but they have to pretend like they're doing something about it.
Yeah. Oh, Catholicism. As someone who was raised in it, worst religion.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so the evangelicals and the Catholics like met in that respect, and they were like, hell the fuck yes.
Yeah, let's form a coalition. Yeah. So Biden is not. So according to this is from the Huffington Post. Biden is not backing off plans to nominate an anti-abortion attorney to a lifetime federal judgeship in Kentucky, despite strong opposition from Democrats and reproductive rights groups, according to a source recently briefed on the White House's plans. White House's officials, by the way, one of the people who's against this is the freaking governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear. He's even saying, please don't nominate this Kentuckian to the court. We have other people in Kentucky that you could do that are, pro-choice.
They're decent people here too.
Yeah, we have.
I noticed that this douchebag is in the Federalist Society.
Yeah, of course, they all are. That's where Kavanaugh is. That's where Gorsuch is. That's where Amy Colbert is. Like, literally, just blame. Okay. I'm just gonna say, like, if you want to find where the Federalist Society headquarters is and occupy where they are, not a bad idea. Just saying, because they really call a lot of the judge shots here when it comes to these things. White House officials have refused to talk about Chad Meredith ever since the Louis Courier Journal reported late last month that he is the president's pick for a soon-to-be vacant U.S. District Court seat in Eastern Kentucky. The newspaper even provided copies of June 23rd emails from the White House to Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear confirming Biden's plans to nominate Meredith, a member of the Federal Society who has fought abortion rights. The White House initially told Beshear that Meredith would be nominated next day on June 24th, but that turned out to be the day the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and the nomination didn't happen. Now it's crickets. It's just not. We just don't comment on vacancies, whether executive branch or judicial, in situations where you have not made a nomination. White House Press Secretary Karen Jean-Pierre told reporters on Wednesday when asked about Meredith, "We just have not made a nomination on this yet."
This is embarrassing. Their support. They want this dude to be a judge, and they're like rallying for Henry Cuellar in Texas against Jessica Cisneros, and it's just funny how the Democrats are just sitting there and they'll just be like, okay, so we're pro-choice and women have the right to choose, and then when it comes down to it, they're just like, okay, where's the money going? We don't care if you're anti-abortion. We don't care if you're pro-choice. We don't care. They'll work with whoever as long as they think that it's gonna benefit them.
Yeah, no,
they're slimy as hell.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And this is just and I mean the reason this is such a big deal is because it happened on the day. I mean Biden's been pressing through federal judges that Trump appointed for like since he got in office.
Yeah. So the source also believes that Meredith would likely be announced as part of a large package of judicial nominees that include many picks that Democrats do like, right? So that's, I guess, the rationalization that Biden would be using for that. Why you would ever trust Mitch McConnell on anything is bonkers. And this just shows how weak. Well, they're doing this on purpose. I'm tired of saying Democrats are weak because
Biden is still he's kind of a dumbass. Like he was arguing the fact that he'd be able to talk. Like he was like, remember, he was like, Republicans are in a fever dream, and once Trump gets out, they're gonna come back to their senses, and it's just gonna be the nightmare is gonna be over. And it's like, bruh, like it's gotten even more extreme. Like what the hell?
Yeah, for sure. And this is just an email that was leaked out regarding the plan to nominate Chad Meredith to the district court for the Eastern District of Kentucky, to be exact. But it's definitely Susan Sarandon's fault. It's definitely Bernie's fault. It's definitely anyone who voted for Bernie's fault. Jill Stein. It's all them. And I mean, this also comes after Nancy Pelosi and Democratic leadership. They endorsed Henry Cuellar, who is pro-life. And so it's just clear that this is not a priority. For whatever reason, it's not letting me scroll up on the comments. But yeah, I saw, I'm guessing this is still Noli's daughter in the chat. It sounds, I hope Noli is okay from what I see. Yeah. Z, you got anything else to respond or say regarding this?
I don't know. I mean, like, it's despicable, and I think that anybody who's looking to Democrats to save them from the encroaching power of the right, I think that they're gonna be like let down and sorely like mistaken, because they're like we were talking about, they're either too dumb to see, or they're definitely buying in on it because they either believe it secretly or there's some kind of money in it for them. So.
Yeah. So wanted to point out the fact that it's Amazon Prime Day.
Yeah.
I don't know about you all. I did not buy anything. In fact, my aunt on Facebook made a status. I love my aunt. She's great. But she made a status on Facebook being like, "Oh, reminder, it's Amazon Prime Day." And I was like, "Yeah, no, they've been abusing their workers a lot. I will be sitting this one out." And I think we need to start when we can, just letting people know, like, hey, you realize what Amazon's doing to its workers. You realize
it's really like disgusting what Amazon's doing to its workers, and people do really need to know the abuses that the people are going through. It's backbreaking. It's brutal, and they don't it's literally a sweatshop in those warehouses.
Yeah, and people, I mean, just see the stories. I mean, when a storm was coming, I forget where, but there was a tornado coming, and they weren't allowed to go home, and then the tornado struck, and then 6 people died. Like, that is a straight up human rights violation.
And not to mention, it's just the fact that, I mean, we talked to some people from Amazon, from the cause Amazon union that's trying to form in North Carolina right now in the Raleigh-Durham area, and they've been through so much shit at Amazon, and they just decided that they were going to just organize, because Democrats aren't coming to help them. I mean, they might stand outside with them a couple times. I mean, just like we saw with Staten Island, we saw the fact that no one said anything about that except for like Crystal Ball and like a couple other people in the independent media.
Well, yeah, and Crystal Ball called out AOC on Twitter, and AOC actually responded. And I'm not going to say Crystal Ball was solely responsible for AOC coming, but I will say that shaming your politicians works,
especially when they respond. And it was really telling in that exchange too, because she wouldn't even respond to Chris Smalls. So you're muted.
So yeah, wanted to just quickly share this video while we have a little bit more time. So this is a worker that works in an Amazon warehouse in Kentucky, and just sharing a little bit of his story from More Perfect Union.
Amazon figured out I was organizing on April, and I was able to make the connection. But they found out because they're monitoring my Facebook posts.
It's a little low.
Monitoring me at work, of course. There was a prosecutor that questioned one of our organizing committee members to try and find out.
Better?
No. Sorry. What was he saying?
I mean, so basically he was saying that he was, Amazon tried to fire him for organizing and such in Kentucky. And so just the common tricks that Amazon
plays. It's really funny because they are starting, they need to update it, because a lot of people like catching onto that playbook. They'll just sit there, they'll find the person who's causing commotion, they'll fire them. And then that was something that they told us about the lawyers at the cause told them. Remember, one of the things that we were told about what they were told to just talk loudly and always talk about being in a union, because if they fire you, they can't just fire you because you were speaking in front of the police and things like that. And so the more mouthy you are, you're actually a lot better off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's just funny. You see how because like you said, Chris Moles got fired at first, which I will point out that Chris Moles has,
not a fan of some of his recent tactics that he's been doing.
Yeah, currying favor in Hollywood is not going to free people or liberate the masses, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a picture with Zendaya. That's cool, I guess, but whatever.
I mean, I think we've talked about this before, and this is something that, is interesting, is that, Amazon, they've got a figurehead, right? Starbucks, there's a bunch of just smaller, like, people who are not figureheads that are really doing a lot of the work, right? So it's interesting to see the different strategies that people are going about when it comes to unionizing. And as someone on the outside, I'm not really one to try and be too critique and say what works and what doesn't. But I think when you look at the results too, it's good to also be like, okay, like Starbucks, like, what are you doing? Because literally every 10 seconds that we breathe, somewhere else is unionized.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but and I think apparently Maryland also saw in this.
I like the approach that these Amazon factories are taking, though. These warehouses seem to be decentralized, and none of these movements are together, and that's really cool. So the Staten Island is not going to have an effect on Cause, and Cause probably isn't going to have an effect in the Kentucky area. But they can still help if they need to, but it won't. But they will be at the behest of public or the organizations. But I think that it being decentralized and having multiple ones instead of one that just calls all the shots, I think that's a very good model to go by.
Absolutely.
And I hope that doesn't destroy Starbucks in the end, because Starbucks is uniting under what?
Starbucks United, Workers United.
Workers United.
They call it Starbucks, but it's under Workers United.
And Workers United has not historically been that great in the past couple years. But they're doing the thing now, so I'm glad that's happening. But we'll just have to see how everything continues to happen, because like you said, every 10 seconds we have a Starbucks.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is really good.
And that is the thing, in like a year when we're going to be seeing a lot of these contracts finalized, right? That'll give us a better idea.
Exactly. Because we, at the moment, we still are it's still up in the air about what they finalize and what they're discussing, and the kind of what compromises are going to be made by the company.
And they take a long time. They take a good amount of time.
And on purpose.
Yeah, it's on purpose, because there's a lot of back and forth, and then it takes a while for even these companies to agree to meet with you, right? So, yeah. Well, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on these places in the next year or so and what the result is. And, I was hearing that Starbucks, they're trying to close a few of the places that are unionizing as well, right?
Yeah, that's going to happen. That's one of the tactics going to happen too.
Yeah. So, the fight isn't open, is not over. But it's, it's looking good, but it's a step. It's a step forward. So, yeah. But yeah, anything else, or are we just about wrapped up?
I think we might call it a short one today if we need to.
Yeah.
And we'll meet back up on Sunday and record.
Yeah.
But yeah, what you got going on?
I got going on? Not too much. Yeah, tune in. I mean, so yeah, Z, you're going to be hosting, I think, on Thursday for the New Left panel. And so I will not be a part of that this week, but I look forward to watching. And,
Tune in, y'all.
Yeah. And like and subscribe, trying to build up. And follow us on Twitter at People's Voice PVN. Thanks, Z, for putting that down there. I should probably put the ad on there too.
That's no problem. And if anybody would like to contribute any, come on a panel at some point, you think you have some leftist views that you would like to share with the world, any writings, anything like that, you can submit them to us, and we will be more than happy to share them with the world. Or have you on. So working on Revolutionary Reader. I've been editing that for the past couple of days. It's coming along fairly well. So hopefully I'll be having that out in the next week and a half, because I think I'm just been taking it easy. Anytime I get frustrated, I stop, because I don't want to be like, I hate this shit. So
yes, yeah. All right. Well,
I hope you feel better, Noli.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope you're recovering. I hope that goes well, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, glad she understands what we're saying, at least. And yeah, our thoughts are with you, Noli. Sorry about whatever happened. It sounds like, yeah, there was a stroke or something. So our thoughts are definitely with you. And thank you for tuning in, regardless of where you are right now with your health. So, all right. On that note, have a good one. Peace.